Hi, I'm Seamless, I promise. And today I want to talk about interharmonic phase cancellation, which is a term that I just invented to title this video something different from another video I have that's just called phase cancellation, because this is slightly different from the whole topic, and while it does still involve the topic, and I don't want to call it just phase cancellation 2. This actually came from a question that someone had once upon a time about what happens when you phase cancel two different kinds of waveforms like you would the same waveform. So for example, if I have two sine waves, same pitch, they're just a sine wave, but if one of them is slightly different pitch, we get phase cancellation. And this is happening because we're given that the two pitches of the sine waves are now making them different size individual cycles. They add together, which means that they're going to eventually they're not going to be in phase anymore. I have a visual for this, which I'm just going to do because it's a lot simpler than me trying to explain it. Bam. I believe I did this on the phase cancellation video, the other phase cancellation video, but it's good to have this sort of reminder here anyway. So here's a visual of a waveform. Ta-da! Let's do a sine wave, because why not? Close enough. Here's another one. All right, so the length of the cycle is just what the note is, and if it's faster or slower, then you get a higher or lower pitch. So if I make if this guy faster than the other guy, you can see that the shape of the waveform changes. When you overlap the two, you can see that even if it begins in phase, because the different sizes of the waveforms, it will eventually get out of phase. Now, why this matters is because a waveform is measured in a particular amount of amplitude that has a numerical value, and there's a positive and a negative, the center being 0. So we have the 0 crossing, positive amplitude, negative amplitude, and when we are adding together waveforms, just like regular math, when you add together positive and negative, you get nothing. So when it eventually gets so perfectly out of phase that it cancels like this, we get that moment of it coming out. But because it's two different pitches, it will eventually come back in phase. And that's why we get the rhythmic phase cancellation of the two different pitches. This is important because a harmonic, the actual term harmonic, is something that is a multiple of the fundamental, which is to say a first harmonic of a fundamental tone being just the note you're playing. A multiple of that is something that is exactly a particular division of that speed. Do it right. Let's just pretend that this is exactly double. Bam. So the beginning is the phases, it's slightly off phase, but like just pretend for a second this is perfectly in phase here. And the interesting part about this is that if you look at this, you can see how, because this one's happening twice in others, there's definitely positives and negatives being added together. So that should mean that there's phase cancellation. And there is, but it's static, which means that and the reason for this is because this waveform will fit entirely within the cycle. And with cancellation that occurs to it will occur, but it'll stay exactly the same. We'll get no rhythmic change. It'll just be the new waveform, essentially. You can see this happening inside Citrus itself, actually, when we're playing. If we add together another harmonic, like this is exactly what we did here. This would be the addition of two sine waves, one that's an octave higher than the other, or one harmonic, and it just becomes this shape, and it stays that shape. However, if this new guy was slightly off pitch, it would start to drift. And that's where we get the rhythmic phase cancellation. Now, all this matters to the original question, which is what happens when you phase cancel a saw wave with a sine wave, because if you just phase cancel a saw wave against a sine wave that's a different pitch, it will phase cancel, but it will only phase cancel the harmonics that it's interacting with, which for this particular example is just the fundamental tone. And so you can see that the fundamental tone itself is the only one that's actually moving or being phase canceled. If I were to make it an octave higher, you'd see a phase cancel against the other guy. Oh, but check this out. What happened there when I put the pitch there slightly in between the two, the fundamental and the first harmonic. The fundamental and the first harmonic both phase canceled. And this brings us back to the reason why I even brought up the whole concept of harmonic at all, is because basically the multiples of the fundamental are the only ones that you can do that will keep a static tone. And this is true for just pretty much just regular chords, which is to say that like only harmonics or just multiples of the fundamental, not necessarily the kinds of harmonics that we're used to using, but only multiples of the fundamental will actually be able to make a chord that's static. And for that's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that are that. But like, for example, if I played just like, which one do you sound wave? Bam. A third, for example, it has a rhythmic nature that repeats naturally, but it is far and away like way faster, or rather slower than the actual oscillation. Because if I did a minor second, which is basically unison that we're doing, the same kind of unison that we're doing to elicit phase cancellation in the first place, the farther you get away, the faster it is. But it's still until we get to a fourth, and then a fifth, and an octave. Because of those, like the octaves are harmonic. Fourths and fifths are particularly interesting, and this is more math about like how they multiply to come together to create the tone they make. But in reality, they're still phase canceling, and it's really particularly interesting because what that means is that you're not actually hearing both at the same time. You're hearing just one or the other. Now, when I had that saw wave in there, and I had that tone in the middle, what that meant is that it was phase canceling against the higher harmonic and the lower harmonic, but it was phase canceling against the higher harmonic faster because it was closer to it. Slower because it was closer to it, and faster because the other one. Yeah, the exact opposite of what I just said. This is pretty cool because you might have heard me throw around the term high frequency phase cancellation. What the hell does that mean? Well, when you're doing a super saw, this is pretty sweet because a saw and a saw, when you phase cancel them together, it isn't so much that like, oh, waveform is phase canceling against another waveform. It's that all the harmonics are doing this. And so like this configuration you can see here, it gets, well, rather this is double, so let's just make it like, yeah, there we go. You can see how it's out of phase, in phase, out of phase, in phase, at a particular speed. The phase cancellation that happens to the next harmonic will be a similar ratio of the same phase cancellation, but it'll be faster. In fact, it'll be about double. I'm pretty sure it's double. Same thing is true for all the ensuing harmonics. This is why when you do that, that was a bit bigger, you get that kind of cascading motion. And it's also why, I mean, you look at the oscilloscope, but you can see that like the tips of the saw are kind of come together, and then they get part of it, part whatever, and the cascading kind of corresponds with that particular motion. What the shape of a waveform is just the addition of harmonics together that forms the shape. The saw wave, for example, happens to be this shape because everything is perfectly in phase. But the second any of the individual harmonics gets out of phase, we suddenly have a different shape altogether. Saw-ish, but like you must mess with it in a little bit, you get this ridiculousness. This is why like a super saw is a thing that people like, because the whole reason why we do super saws at all, the whole reason why we jam them together and we create tones like that are because we're trying to create new shapes, and the business that's occurring is happening at the harmonic level. The phase cancellation is happening, but it's happening at every individual harmonic spaces. This is also why Harmor is particularly ludicrous. I've always gone on about how like its basic unison and your ability to control the individual pitch of the harmonics is a game changer, because like I said, the whole purpose of unison is to change the shape of the waveform through high frequency phase cancellation. Because in Harmor, what you can do, remember what we said before about how the phase cancellation is a per harmonic thing. We can just control it as a per harmonic thing. See how it's only happening in the area that I've specified for it to occur. And then, of course, this is just to illustrate that it's the same effect. But then, of course, if we do something like this, we are changing the nature of the cascade, because we're telling it that particular harmonics are different pitches now instead of a whole solid saw wave, and we're going to get, as a result, a different profile for phase cancellation. And that's one of the big reasons why I like Harmon so much. But I just wanted to illustrate, because the answer to the question, the original question, which was what happens when you phase cancel a sine wave or saw wave, is that basically only the harmonics that are interacting with the other waveform are going to phase cancel at all. Which is not to say that you can't make a phase canceled saw wave and sine wave do something cool. Like, for example, if I jam them together with a form of compression, then the effect of this changing level now, because phase cancellation does reduce the level of the signal, you can see this happening to it. And of course, one of my favorite things to do is to have a saw wave and do one of these and then one of these. And the fun about that is that when you distort them, you get a pretty fun result. And now when you start to phase cancel it, because in the front, all that's happening is that, let me just mute this while I'm doing it. All at the front, all that's happening is that the fundamental tone is changing its level. But because distortion, like its profile is controlled by how loud it is going into a signal, the change in level is enough for it to alter the profile, which is affecting all the rest of the harmonics, because distortion is just is when it adds additional harmonics to a sound. Never mind all the specificities about what wave shaping is just that distortion follows suit. And so that we're able to leverage the phase cancellation of a single harmonic against a harmonically rich sound, even though those harmonics themselves are never moving. This is particularly handy for when you want to have unison-like effects. But if you're familiar with trying to do some saw waves, you might notice that it gets out of tune kind of a lot. And if we target specific harmonics in the stack, like just the fundamental, then all the other harmonics are pretty much fine, and we don't get that pitch changingness unless, of course, we distort it too hard. Versus if I did the opposite, where I changed this guy's pitch. The pitch change is much more obvious and the detune is much heavier. Phase cancellation is a lot of fun. It's the cornerstone for basically the entirety of subtractive synthesis. And it is, of course, even more powerful when you utilize additive synthesis, like what Harbor does, which is a whole per harmonic control kind of thing, which really, like, and when we're doing what we're doing with Citrus, I mean, we're doing the additive synthesis when we create, we make a saw wave out of harmonics and we change its phases. That's the additive thing to do. But even if I didn't do that, even if I just had a regular saw wave and did the same thing, we are actually still kind of leveraging additive synthesis in the sense that we're targeting a specific harmonic for phase cancellation by creating this sine wave and having it play against it and changing its pitch. It's just that it happens to be the fundamental tone. And that's how we were able to make the phase cancellation do our bidding in a very targeted fashion. So that's the value of phase cancellation on different kinds of waveforms with different harmonic profiles. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. I really hope that it kind of got rambly there, but all of that information eventually added up, and I hope you stay through the whole thing, because boy, I bet that was a lot for some of you. But if you have any questions about it, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know if you like my new hair and beard. And as usual, have a nice day.